We wanted to get into one of the most controversial subjects of the 21st century, which has turned out to be the controversy surrounding the 13th chapter of the book of Romans. So we have many factors here. The armchair Bible study student, the armchair preacher, the Monday morning quarterback who didn't even realize that there were 13 chapters in the book of Romans until March 2020, about 34 months ago or so. Now, what we have is, in the 13th chapter of the book of Romans, there are two major schools of thought. The first one is that this is civil government, Romans 13. The second one is that this is church government. I espouse the second view for, among many reasons, because it's the correct view, because it's the biblical view, and because it's the correct view. I wouldn't teach you wrong, and I wouldn't learn wrong. But many of you have learned wrong, and you've been brainwashed, and you've been hoodwinked into thinking that you must obey your government because Romans 13 tells you to. So we're going to debunk that today. So what we have is, in Vermont, yesterday, you have in a high school, a public high school, a group of freshman girls on a soccer team. They're all in their locker room after they just got through with their soccer game. And these 14-year-old freshman girls have a transgender student that walks in who is a biological male with all the male genitalia, who walks into the 14-year-old girls' locker room after soccer, and this transgender is naked, at which point one of the 14-year-old girls run out, horrified, traumatized, scarred for life because of what she's just seen. And as it is today in the United States of America, because of her traumatization and her complaining to her teachers, what happens to this 14-year-old girl? She's suspended. And the coach that stood up for her, who is a male coach, is terminated without pay or benefits. This is not Russia or China. This isn't happening in Sweden, or this is happening in the United States of America. Well, we've been going through that for years. So the chickens are just coming home to roost now with these individuals. So it's starting to gain footage, and the media is picking it up. Well, we've been going through that for years. So welcome to the club. But this 14-year-old girl who's traumatized for life because this transgender's in her locker room with her and demanding that they accept her, she has to now be suspended and write a paper as to how she was so offensive to this transgender for not making them feel welcome. And the coach was terminated because the coach misgendered this little 14-year-old boy who thinks he's a girl. And whatever perverted, sick, demented, evil person told this boy that he was a girl, they're the real problem. All right? And if you're keeping up with the news, yesterday, the LDS, or Latter-day Saints in Utah, have now embraced same-sex marriage. They've said, we're just not going to come out in opposition to same-sex marriage. These are the Mormons. These are the Latter-day Saints, the FLDS. This is what the leadership in Salt Lake City, Utah has done. Okay, a lawsuit is issued by the little 14-year-old girl's dad that was suspended. And when they issued the lawsuit, the school, because of the gutless cowards that they are, reinstated the coach and reinstated the little girl to the school. Now, to Romans 13. Verse number 1, let every soul be subject unto the higher powers. Now, since so many of us have espoused that this is civil government, what you're telling me is that that little 14-year-old girl was wrong because she stood up for her convictions and complained about a boy being in her locker room. You're telling me she was wrong. You're telling me that she needs to lay down and just be quiet. You're telling me that the coach shouldn't have misgendered this little. You're telling me that they were wrong. You're telling me that the dad who told the school, I'm suing you, was wrong. That's what you're saying. When you closed your church and obeyed your governor, mayor, and chief of police and sheriff, you're telling me that this girl is wrong. Well, we're going to break up that mythological mindset today. Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers. Now, here's the problem with you getting into different Bible versions, which you can find hundreds of. This is called the book. This is put out by Tyndale. This is a New Living Translation. And I shudder to think that this is even on my bookshelf behind my head. I don't want the waves of this book to come through my mind. But what it says is, in Romans 13:2, those who refuse to obey the laws of the land are refusing to obey God, and punishment will follow. What kind of sick, illiterate, biblically damaging person would even dare to write this on a page and call it a translation of the Holy Bible? You're telling me that I have to obey the government that tells me, forget about closing the church. That's the main topic here. We've been in that battle since March of 20. Some of you will never come around to that school of thought because you've got too much pride, arrogance, and haughtiness to admit that you were wrong. So let's just talk about this poor 14-year-old soccer playing girl who's forced now to play soccer and take a shower and change clothes with a 14-year-old boy. What kind of gutless wonder dads didn't stand up for the rest of the soccer team girls? What is the matter with you? Well, I'll tell you, it's the same preachers that attacked me for keeping the church open and suing my godless governor. So, I know the answer to that already. You think that Romans 13 is civil government. The policeman does not frighten people who are doing right, but those doing evil will always fear him. So if you don't want to be afraid, keep the laws and you will get along well. The policeman is sent by God to help you. Behind me here on one of these books in one of my two libraries is the book The Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who talks about the police under Stalin, who were the NKVD. They wore blue caps because they felt that they were God and the sky was the limit of their powers. They killed conservatively 25 million people, liberally 50 million people. Joseph Stalin killed more of his own people than anybody else. Are you telling me that you have to obey Joseph Stalin? That you have to obey those disgraces to the human race in Vermont school leadership that suspend a little 14-year-old girl for being in a locker room with a 14-year-old trans? Are you telling me that we should obey the Antichrist? Are you telling me that Romans 13 is civil government? Yes, you are. You can't pick and choose what laws you want to obey. Stay tuned for more of this subject. We'll see you soon.